How do you center clay on a pottery wheel? There are many different ways to do it. In this video, I'll show you how I do it in my everyday studio work. The clay is prepared. Let's get started. First, I slap the clay into a smooth ball. This helps prevent trapping air inside. Neither the wheel nor the clay should be too wet or too dry. I describe the surface as having a soft satin sheen. I simply run the palm of my hand over it, and that's usually about right. After placing the clay on the wheel, beginners can gently shape it into a rough cylinder. It doesn't hurt. In fact, it helps. Once we've added a little water, we can begin. But first, I want to show you something. Look closely at my fingertips. They trail in the direction of rotation. That's important. That's why I use my right hand around the clay, not my left. If you use the wrong hand, your fingertips can catch the spinning clay, and it can give you quite a scare. During centering, each hand has a different job. The left hand presses downward. The right hand pushes toward the center. By constantly adjusting the pressure, the clay gradually becomes rounder. Watch carefully. As the left hand moves down, the right hand has to relax. When the right hand pushes inward, the left hand is forced upward. Add a little water whenever the clay no longer slides smoothly. Centering works best at a fairly high wheel speed. Remember, every movement depends on the wheel completing another revolution. By the end, the clay should have a reasonable height-to-width ratio. Not too wide and not too tall. You can practice centering with the same piece of clay over and over again. Simply push it off center and start again. Notice what my left thumb is doing. It's smoothing the top of the clay. Try to finish with a clay shape that already resembles the form you're planning to throw. Now let's look at it from a second camera angle. I'll clean my hands first so you can clearly see which parts of my hands are actually doing the work. Give the clay time. It happens gradually, one revolution at a time. On my right hand, the pressure comes mainly from the palm and fingertips. On the left, it's mostly the base of the thumb pressing downward. You'll often see potters cone the clay up and down over and over again. I don't think that's necessary. If your clay was prepared properly and doesn't contain trapped air, quiet, steady centering is enough. Everything else just wastes time. Now let me show you what I mean by pushing toward the center. Imagine the center of the clay. Now imagine a straight line from your arm directly into that center point. That's where your force has to go. Otherwise, you'll never truly center the clay. When you've finished practicing, dry the clay off and you can use it again.
Schauen wir uns die Sache von oben
Now
an.
let's look from above. I'll clean away a little excess clay first. It's perfectly fine if both hands touch each other somewhere.
Ja, bisschen Dreck machen wir weg. Es schadet nichts, wenn sich beide Hände an einer Stelle irgendwie berühren.
The more connected your hands are, the more stable the whole system becomes.
Wie
And
gesagt,
again,
zentrieren
center at a
möglichst
fairly
hohe
high wheel
Geschwindigkeit.
speed.
Eine wichtige Sache ist, wenn ihr meint, ihr seid
One
fertig mit
important
Zentrieren,
thing, when you
dann
think you're
lasst
finished,
nicht
don't suddenly let
plötzlich
go.
los.
That quick release can throw the clay
Durch
slightly
diesen
off center again.
Druck kann man
Here it's running
den mühsam
perfectly
zentrierten
smooth.
Ton
Now I'll
gleich
try to
wieder
make it
ein wenig
wobble,
ins Wackeln
not
bringen.
very successfully. I've probably been doing this for too many years.
Dran
Release your hands slowly and everything
Geh weg.
stays centered.
und ein klein wenig wackelt er. Es gelingt mir nicht wirklich, aber glaubt mir, ich mache es wahrscheinlich schon zu lange, um ihn zum Wackeln zu bringen. Langsam loslassen, alles ist gut. Wenn ihr den Klumpen sauber abschneidet,
If you cut the clay cleanly from the wheel, the thin layer left behind becomes the perfect adhesive for the next piece of
das
clay.
ideale Haftmittel für den nächsten Klumpen. Hier braucht ihr weder Wasser
No
noch
extra water is
sonst
needed.
irgendwas.
It
Das hält
sticks
perfekt.
perfectly. Now here's the view from the opposite side. Many beginners find it helpful to brace their elbow against their hip and push with their whole body. I used that method myself when I started. These days I don't. My right arm rests much higher on my thigh. I'll mark the spot. That's where my elbow rests. With the elbow against the hip method, I simply end up sitting too far away from the clay. My left hand rests as close to the clay as possible, supported by my left thigh. Again, left hand pushes down, Right hand pushes toward the center, alternating the pressure and give the clay time. With every revolution, it becomes smoother and more centered. And keep practicing with the same piece of clay. Now let me show you what happens if the clay isn't really centered and you continue anyway. The opening won't end up in the middle. One side of the wall becomes thicker than the other, and as a beginner, you'll never recover from that. Look at the base. It's wobbling. The wall thickness is uneven. There's simply no point. Until you can center properly, there's little value in practicing the next throwing steps. I honestly recommend spending a week or two doing nothing but centering. Don't worry about throwing pots yet. Without proper centering, the results simply aren't worth much. Repeating the same movement over and over again is actually a good thing. Skills continue developing while you sleep. Very often, you wake up the next morning and suddenly you've taken a big step forward. Don't overthink it. There's simply no substitute for practice. As I mentioned, your distance from the wheel is very important. I prefer sitting closer because then my legs become solid support points. Here is where my elbow rests and over here my left arm. That gives me a very stable working position. Give it a try. In the next video, we'll throw complete pots before looking at each individual step in more detail later on.